I would have preferred to do this video immediately after watching this film, but I wasn't able to. I had to leave, go somewhere, and so I saved my review for when I returned. I want to get this up by tomorrow. Well, right now it's the 1st. The movie officially releases July 2nd, tomorrow, on Amazon Prime. But tonight, I got a chance to watch an advanced screening of it through Amazon Screenings. It's a pretty cool place. You can get invitations to watch different things, and which is what I do a lot of times when I do reviews for movies. For recent movies, a lot of that has been through screenings that I've been able to participate in. So today, it was, well, as you can see here, the Tomorrow War. And I have to say, I enjoyed this film quite a bit. I went into it expecting and hoping that it would be pretty decent. The trailers made it look really good, and it's about time travel and trying to prevent this bad event from happening, or trying to do something about what happens 30 years in the future when these aliens apparently come to Earth and they start just killing everybody, and mankind is basically going extinct. So that's the premise. And I went into it kind of, I was following along. I knew the basic premise, and I thought it was going to go in a certain direction at a certain point in the film. I thought it was going to go in a certain direction, but then it didn't. It went in this other direction, and then it went in this other direction. And I was pleasantly surprised at the different routes the film took. It wasn't that it was unexpected. It was just, in a way unexpected. Some of the turns that it took, I wasn't expecting, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The things that happen in here made sense. One thing that I really appreciated about this was that while it's a sci-fi horror type time travel sort of thing, and obviously you have to kind of suspend your disbelief or whatever you call it, because this stuff is not true, but it doesn't matter. It's sci-fi. We like the fiction aspect of it. That's what draws it to us. That's what draws us to it. Lord have mercy, it's not even tomorrow. What was I saying? Oh, what I was saying is what I liked about this film, what I started to notice a bit after getting into it, was that while it's formulaic to an extent, just because of the type of film it is, it's not formulaic in a bunch of different ways that, like, let's say when a scene is happening or a certain thing is happening and you're like, oh, such and such is going to happen. Well, then you think you can predict it because you've seen this sort of thing so many times, but then it doesn't happen the way you thought. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. I really appreciated that it took routes that I wasn't expecting, that aren't necessarily typical for this type of film. Something else that I really liked about this film, well, the acting was quite good. It was, was decent. Nobody really did a poor job or anything like that. But what I was getting ready to say is that I also liked the side characters that they showed in here. Like the people that Chris Pratt jumped forward in time with, and the people that he interacted with once he was there. Specifically, the character played by Yvonne, not even going to try, the chick from Chuck and Dexter. And the interactions that he had with the different people, and the different moments, different sentimental type moments that happened. It wasn't like there was a ton, but whenever little, downtimes would happen and the characters would interact or whatever, and different sentimental moments would occur, it wasn't anything that felt shoehorned in just for the sake of putting it in there. It felt like something that evolved naturally as the story progressed. I did film a reaction to this when I watched it, which will probably go up quite a while from now. But I mentioned at the end of that, I did sort of a little mini review. I mentioned at the end of that, well, I was comparing it to Army of the Dead, and where Army of the Dead faltered while this one did not, when it came to certain scenes and how things happened, that it didn't feel like it was unnatural. It felt like it flowed naturally. It felt like it was a commonsensical sort of progression of events. Specifically, I'm talking about when little sentimental things would happen. In Army of the Dead, it was just like plopped in the middle of the, like, I mentioned that in my review, this scene where he and his love interest or whatever have this little moment in the middle of things that are happening that just it's like, this makes no sense. It's ridiculous. And then the scene with him and his daughter at the end was so freaking typical, and we're just like, I can't, you know. But when certain things like that happened in this film, it didn't feel that way. It fit. And that's a difference between good writing and poor writing. And that was another thing I appreciated, was the writing. It was quite solid. I mentioned at the end of my reaction that it's very possible if I rewatch it, maybe I'll find some issues with it. This is just my first impression sort of review that I'm giving you right now, and my first impression was very positive. I like the writing. I like the characters, especially the side characters. And I like the pacing. I thought it was pretty well done. There were some moments with the cinematography, like some slow-mo things that happened that I kind of wish maybe they hadn't used that particular style at that particular moment. I'm speaking specifically about slow-mo stuff. That didn't happen often. There was just only like a moment or two. The action scenes were pretty cool. The guys and girls that were involved in going and doing all this fighting, they were these tough people. They'd been through a lot. Something else that I also liked is that there wasn't any sort of political or any sort of statement or anything. Well, some political stuff, but basically like making fun of politicians and, you know, showing what idiots they are. But what I mean is there wasn't anything that felt like it was just put in there just for the sake of sending some sort of message or whatever, you know, like the stuff that happens nowadays. There were men and women fighting side by side, and the women weren't making a big deal out of, I'm a woman, I'm so strong and powerful. These were people that had to fight. They had to very quickly learn how to do what they were doing, or they were all going to die. And they all equally had to do what they could do to try to survive. So they were like drafting everybody basically to go and try to, not everybody, certain people, but it was a worldwide draft. I mean, they weren't discriminating between men and women. It was everybody that was drafted. They had to go do this thing. And it was just the situation that they were in, and there was no sort of, you know, message being delivered or anything like that. It was about survival and trying to prevent humanity from going, or the human race from going extinct. Let's see. I was sitting there thinking, wondering if I had anything else to say, but I think maybe I've gone through my whole list. I have these little notes written just to remind myself, not telling me what to say, but I've already talked about good side characters. Certain characters I thought would die. They did, but then others didn't. So, like I said, I was a little surprised about things like that happened. There were also some funny little comedic type moments going on, but it wasn't over the top. It was sort of a tension breaker. There was specifically one character in here that he was a joy to watch the whole time he was on the screen. If he pops up here, I'll point him out. But he was I don't even know who the guy is. It's the guy, this guy to the far right. Yeah, to the far right on that particular one that it showed. I don't know who he is, but he was pretty funny. He was kind of like the comic relief a little bit, but it wasn't crazy and ridiculous. Oh, there was something else I was going to mention too. Shoot. Oh, there was something else that I did forget to say, was that the underlying theme of this movie is about relationships, and specifically the relationship between a father and his child. And so that is woven into the narrative pretty strongly. You've got Chris Pratt and his father's played by J.K. Simmons, and then they have this very, very fractured relationship. And then also the movie deals a lot with the relationship between Chris Pratt and his daughter. And something that I thought was, and this has nothing to do with the relationships. I'm jumping through. I'm trying to remember to say what I had forgotten to say a second ago. There were things that happened early on, and I knew that whatever was shown or mentioned was going to come back, or I speculated that it was going to come back around and play a part at some point in the story, and it did. And that it wasn't necessarily, that's not a complaint. I like that it did that because that's indicative of good writing. Like, it wasn't something that was just put in there just for the sake of it and then it never showed up again or anything like that. Like, it fit, it made sense, and they made good use of the writing. I don't feel like there were really many scenes in here at all, if any, probably like none, where the pacing was slow. There was a time, it was around 1 hour into the film, and I'm like, oh wow, we're only 1 hour into it. It feels like it's gone on longer. But that wasn't necessarily a complaint. It was just there had been so much that happened by then. I was like, dang, I got more than an hour to go, because the film, the runtime is about 2 hours and 23 minutes, but of course 3 to 5 minutes of that are credits. So let's say 2 hours and 15 to 20 minutes, something like that. So it's a decent length. It's not too long. I feel like if it had been shorter, it would have felt much more rushed. And there were scenes at the end that happened where things were kind of being dealt with. Maybe you could say some of those scenes were a bit rushed, possibly, but to me they didn't feel rushed because it felt like this was something, they didn't need to go into all the nitty-gritty and all of the underlying different things. They didn't need to show all this other stuff. They just needed to show from here to here and here. And that's all they really needed to do. And if it had dragged on too long, then I think it would have felt like it was dragging on too long. And if they had rushed it up or, compressed it, then it would have felt like it was a little bit too rushed. But I was happy with this overall. I think if you're a sci-fi fan, especially if you're a time travel fan, you'll probably appreciate this. I like that there were these little twists and things that happened that I was not expecting. There is a twist. I don't think it's been given away in the trailers. Maybe some really savvy people will figure it out before it's even really explicitly shown in here, but I didn't figure it out until it happened. And then I was like, oh, I knew what they were leading up to when this event happened. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't expecting that, but that's kind of cool. And so it was interesting. So yeah, I think I've gone through everything. My list: side characters, relationships, it's second chances, tying in with the relationship thing. There was second chance elements at play when it came to the theme of relationships in here, which I already touched on when I mentioned the fractured relationship he had with his father. I like that it didn't take formulaic route. I like that it was solidly written. I like that certain moments didn't feel shoehorned in. Blah blah. I got all my notes under my belt. I can't think of anything else to comment on. If you guys check this movie out, let me know what you thought about it. Did you feel like it was a pretty solid sci-fi time travel type of flick? I certainly did. So I hope it does well. I hope it gets good ratings. I haven't checked out any reviews for this. I would be surprised if it ends up having really poor ratings. It wouldn't surprise me if the critics, it would surprise me a little bit, but not overly. It would surprise me if the audience ends up absolutely trashing this film. But maybe I'll go see if there's any ratings out there right now. I don't know, because the film's not officially out yet, and I don't know if there's any audience reviews at this point, unless it's people like me. Well, they might not even let us, actually, because sometimes they don't even open up reviews for the regular viewer until official release date. So, all right, well, I think that's it, you guys, and I'm gonna wrap it up. Later.